Still some concern over the fact that when we reach man's secondary world as opposed to the necessary one that would just keep him physically alive, that you're always dealing with the collective, all of humanity's intelligence and all of humanity, even physically, seeking a kind of comfort with dead food, dead ideas, dead people's ideas, dead institutions. That is, nothing that's contemporary and alive enough that would fit the kind of mode to be referred to as faddish, fashionable, or cultish. And we were using as the prime example, I say we, life does it, I was just reporting on it, religion, but you could also have men looking for the comfort of dead ideas, either in science, or those of you fleet of mind, in the scientific method. You could have people apparently trying to seek it in the arts of humanity. It all comes down to one thing very clearly, one thing that is very blatant, so much so that you cannot see the whales that eat the sharks. Since so many people obviously took notes and was impressed by that one. Well, it has to do with things being so large. And there's no such thing in a finite world as the end of the food chain, because in a finite world there's no beginning of the food chain. And so all sharks are eaten by whales, except nobody can see the whales. You just think, where'd he go? And I'm not talking about just death. People go, where'd my dream go? Where'd my talent go? Where'd my sex drive go? Don't guess you want to get into that, do you? That's all right. No, you people are still young. Young and relatively healthy. But at any rate, you have the continuing reliance on what appears to be external ideas, external sources of authority. And for the last few nights I was using the reference, calling them Holy Scripture. And religion obviously is the prime exponent and source of Holy Scripture, but also the scientific method, the world of art, the world of just humanistic philosophy, just the world of everyday walking around common sense is also Holy Scripture. Because if you lived in Azerbaijan and you were neither Christian, Muslim, Jew, or anything, and you just lived around with a whole bunch of bricklayers, which I happen to know Azerbaijan is just full of bricklayers. In case you've been to Mississippi lately and wondered, where have all the bricklayers gone? They have not gone where the flowers went with the 60s. A lot of them went to Azerbaijan, but at any rate, there is no way for an ordinary person to feel as though, and I say person, we're talking about ordinary mind because there is no offense and there's no attack on any person in the world. But there is no way the collective thinking of man, that is, an ordinary person using their ordinary intelligence, homegrown intelligence, has any feeling of what they're doing, which is why one of the Kyroots point out that an absolute benchmark of civility is the feeling of uncertainty. Or another one tonight, Kyroot pointed out that in the city, a proof of superior intelligence is what? Having doubts. Admitting, of course, having doubts sounds nice. It sounds scientific. Or if you're religious, it sounds as though you are in line with mainstream religious thought, such as, well, of course, what we really want to know, we don't know, and the church doesn't know either, and so we all have doubt and we engage in faith. But that's a point, proof that you have religion. And it's passes in the city as proof. The crude version, Kyroots already did some many weeks back, if you recall, that in one sense, in the city, one of the proofs of superior intelligence seems to be an abject, blatant admission of ignorance. It just slides through many times. And I don't mean just bricklayers. It can be people with advanced degrees that say, yes, I am probably the world's leading cosmologist. But as to where the universe came from, God only knows. Pardon me for saying that. Which was another Kyroot tonight, if you recall, that all men in the mainstream of life, sane men, even those not religious, love to dream of the ultimate mystery. And if we take some humanistic, atheistic scientists, cosmologists, that would say, I've got no interest in religion, I don't believe in it, even they dream of ultimate mysteries, like, where in the hell did the universe come from? Yeah, I know, Big Bang Theory sounds neat, but then they like to muse and think. The more you like to think, the more you like to think. and dream of ultimate mysteries. And Kyroots even went ahead and spoiled it for you, as if you needed it. That the reason that men dream of mysteries, whether it be religion or science, is that there is an uncodified, an unspoken awareness that everyone has. That once the final answers are revealed, they will prove to have been nonverbal. They cannot speak up. So since they can't speak up, what is an ultimate mystery? What else could be a mystery to a thinking person? If the ultimate mystery was not silent, then the human mind would finally figure it out. And let's say finally figured it out, don't worry forever. You know, hell, you've had 2,000 or 3,000 years. We've had some pretty smart people. From city measurements, which I won't go into. Kyroots already did that for you tonight. But by all accounts, we've had some quite intelligent and learned people that knew they were just the walking encyclopedia of their time. And they didn't know what was going on. So, there is the kind of operational awareness of this idea of some great secret, which would be the whale compared to the shark, is going to turn out to be nonverbal. And so therefore everyone loves a mystery. And everyone knows it is a mystery. They don't know how. And religious people that try to explain it one way, scientific people try to explain it another way, artistic people would try to explain it another way. But the basis of it is that yes, it is a great mystery, because wherever it is, it can't talk. Because if it could talk, you would say it. Einstein would have said it. Buddha would have said it. Your mama would have said it. Somebody would have said it. Of course, somebody could have said it. But if they said it, it doesn't matter, because you say, I've heard that. There is, so now talking about Holy Scripture, external sources of authority. If it were not for those of all stripes, whether it be artistic manifestos that somebody comes up with, or whether it be actual, literal, religious Holy Scripture, or whether it be scientific dogma and theory, whatever the contemporaneous one would be in any field, it is still external authority, because an ordinary man, and you can't take it as an attack. I guess you're an ordinary wise ass listening to this, you could say, yes, it is an attack, and I agree with you, because most people are dumbasses. Not to be confused with the city of the same name in our fine state of Texas. Is an ordinary person's mind could not think in any meaningful way did it not have an external source of authority. That should range anywhere from being so blatant and so obvious that no one's ever mentioned it before, which was the opening Kyroots tonight, to the fact of that is so obscure, that is so insane that it cannot be true, which that within itself should be prime evidence to you. You should be able to feel it. You could not think without some external source of authority. If you're an ordinary person, you could say, well, you're saying I couldn't think unless I'd had some education. Okay. But the speaker in the park tonight said experience without thought regarding same is like eating without tasting the food. And all of you know what the man in the crowd said. He said, I've been chowing down there most of my life. Because you accept the fact that if I'm thinking, then I'm thinking about something. If I say, well, where did you get it? You say, well, I've been educated, I've read on my own, I went to school here, I went to graduate school there, and of course, I repeat, I've thought a lot on my own, I've read books that weren't required in school, I've read books, I watch TV, listen to radio. And so, you know, and I think for myself. I listen, I weigh this, I weigh that, and I think about it. I like that band that marched and said, starved or stuffed. Or stuffed or starved. Stuffed or starved. From our flanks our steaks are carved. Yes, I'm a self-educated man. That's a hell of a responsibility and weight to take upon oneself. I mean, from one view, that's the ultimate mea culpa. I'm a self-made man. Well, I wouldn't be saying that out loud. Share the blame. I take all the responsibility. That's one of the benefits of the notion of environment. Well, I may have a few small mental problems and some genetic defects, but, you know, Jesus Christ, a lot of it was the poor upbringing I had. Oh. Well, back to Holy Scripture is what I want you to see in a wider sense. Let me make the easy shot. The easiest one to detail verbally would be actual in the idea of religion, but you can see it in the areas of the scientific method, attempt to be artistically attuned to life. But the idea of Holy Scripture and outside source of authority in the extreme, which would be religion, or in the original form, it amounts to at the individual level, not just a collective need that man has for an external source of authority, but the individual level, it gets down to this, whether you ever said it this way or not. That's what we're trying to get to last time. Was it becomes operational in individuals like this. Well, now I'm quoting, well, if God's already addressed this matter, yeah, I don't have to think about it. That is it. Now, in case you feel as though you got a little lost, let's take right quick just the extreme, fundamental, absolute religious fanatic of whatever stripe, it doesn't matter. But he says that God or Allah, Jehovah, he says God has already addressed this matter. He says you should not do so and so. I mean, it says right here in our holy book, the book that here in my community, here in my kingdom, where I grew up, where I live, that if you naysayed that or if you poo-pooed that, you could be in a world of trouble. You just don't do it. So at the most fundamental level, it is, well, I do not have to think about that. I may not like it because I have some kind of demonic influence. Which, am I going to redo every Kyroot tonight? And when man begins to think, one of the first things he thinks about, other than where'd the Garden of Eden go, and Kyroots covered that tonight. It was here just a minute ago. Just before I start thinking, it was here. And where is it? They have raised it. They had to demolish it. I mean, it's urban renewal, so that they could put up a what? A talking high-rise. So just for any of you who thought that was a misspelling or that who got misread, they had to demolish the garden very shortly after Adam started talking and had his 3 sons. The first 3 were noted tonight. But they had to immediately raise that mother to make room for a talking high-rise. The external source of authority, a man could not, any sane man, at the most fundamental level where I was going to start, if their Holy Scripture says, thou shalt not do so-and-so, or thou should do so-and-so, you cannot refute that. But more than that, and a man can say, well, I can't always do it, but I can't disagree with it. Because what I started to say before the garden was destroyed, or shortly thereafter, men conjured up their minds the idea of gods and demonic forces, because by being able to do so, you have immediately, they just don't look at it this way, but you have anthropomorphized all of man's, now this is his description, I'm not saying, but it's all of his shortcomings, all of his faux pas, his misdeeds, at a very fundamental level, one that they seem to be doing more and more. The fundamental religions, it's not all that new, but it seems to be more common, is now I hear them on TV or somewhere addressing, join the church or send in your money, and let's do something about those terrible, and then they start referring to bills that people have, charge cards, but they treat it, and don't just laugh at this now or you'll miss it, they treat, they treat the charges you're getting from your MasterCard, they treat it as like a demonic force. It's these demons that have latched themselves onto you, you poor undeserving creature. Notwithstanding the fact, what they're insinuating is you had nothing to do with it. It's just one day, you being a decent God-fearing person, you went to your mailbox and there were demons in your mailbox. Oh, they didn't like demons. It was suddenly an envelope and it was marked, Master Charge Payment Center, Roanoke, Virginia, where it is. And you open it up and it says that you owe $2,200 for clothes. And it's like, it's Job all over again. It's these afflictions have been put upon me for no reason. Do you understand? They are literally, and that's nothing new, by the way. It's in the Old Testament, it's in the Quran, but they're down to doing it now on TV. At any rate, it's treating. Now I'm using people's ordinary terms. They're treating, let's say in this case, a person's financial weakness. that the guy can't help buying every time they have a tire or battery sale. And he's got a garage full of tires, and his wife, of course, you're a female, you got a closet full of clothes, or maybe you got a closet full of tires, I don't know. But that's like your weakness. So you keep going in debt. But now they treat it. What I didn't want you to miss was once you come up with the idea of gods and demons, then whatever it is that you find, that life makes you find to be one of your own shortcomings, weaknesses, usually comes out called sin, but one of your hobbies, that I can't help buying things. And I don't have the money, so I go in debt. But once you come up with the idea of gods and demons, that is, external sources of authority and power, then you can anthropomorphize what was from your view, not mine, your shortcoming. Well, like demon rum was a common term, like that booze is actually alive. And again, that you're just a God-fearing, decent person, and every now and then you'll be walking down the street, and you can't help it, they're around, you don't mean to, but you happen to walk past a bar. And you're just walking along, and suddenly a bottle of rum just jumps out like a mugger out of this bar, and you just mind your own business, and just grabs you and puts itself in your mouth and does like this. And you're helpless. Maybe it holds an arm, but it does this. Demon rum. Demon charges on your MasterCard. Again, I keep wanting to do this, but can we stop a moment and reflect upon the beauty of this? For anybody who doesn't believe in God, and you got to believe in one of the world's great painters or jokesters, it's not my fault. Which I'm not saying it is your fault, but they believe it is, or they wouldn't have to look for some way to blame it, see? Because that's what makes energy run. But now, I say now, we're 4,000 years ago. You just think it's now. Well, I can wrap it up for those of you I started to say were old enough. Whatever happened to him was Cliff Wilson doing that thing of Geraldine, the devil made me do it. And it's not all that funny about the charge cards or demon rum. They have done it. Humanity does it. It turns, in case you never tried to look at this way or had the occasion, the whole ideas of God, I can explain all sorts of ways or map it out about it being the attempt, and it's an admirable, it's the only attempt they got going right now, to fill in, to scratch where the nervous system itches, where it's still growing. The idea of God. It's like a symbol for a completed intelligence. But it's also something else. The gods, the other side to it is always, you cannot have in a three-dimensional landscape, you cannot have anything existing that does not have two sides. And so as soon as you got God, as soon as you got a Zeus, you got an anti-Zeus. As soon as you got a God, you got a Satan or Lucifer or whoever. And so as soon as you've got not just God representing, because see, ordinary people, ordinary intelligence will go along if you said, all right, just let's take this, that I'm not being offensive to you, a religious person, but just symbolically, you got to admit that God, Muhammad even, just these messengers, Moses, but the ultimate thing, the core of religion, of your religion, is the God. Yes. All right. No offense, but you must admit, if we try and get it sort of on a more personalized level, it represents, in a sense, the perfected man. And they'll say, well, yeah, he's more than that. Yeah, I know. They always got to say that. They can't, at any rate. But they would say, all right, you're right, it represents the perfected man. But then nobody ever, because of the way things grow, it is evolutionally correct. But they never applied that to the idea of the anti-gods. That is, the Satan's. To them, if you try to get them to discuss it for a minute, they say, well, now that is completely removed. That's why we have the concept of paradise and Hades. Got Dante stuck in the center, thinking, well, what'll I write about? What'll I write about to entertain people and put them to sleep before Bunyan is born, which he took care of that. Don't any lit majors write me. What are you doing watching TV? At any rate, ordinary religious people, without feeling it was being blasphemous, would go along, and some of them have even written. It wouldn't just take me, have written in a way of saying, well, the whole idea of God, notwithstanding the other great blah, blah, blah things that God actually must be, does represent to us feeble humans, and our feeble human minds, does have to represent the perfection of man. That's what we see in it. But then nobody ever says, well, wait a minute, then what does that Satan mean? Because if they did, which they don't, not supposed to, but it would bring about what I'm pointing out to you, that one of the great purposes that cannot be seen, because it is too much like a whale, is once the mind has the idea outside of itself, that there is an outside authority or outside forces. When I say authority, I don't mean just good from their view. Once they have come up with gods and demons, then all of what you consider, if you're ordinary, that you consider your missteps, your misdeeds, your weaknesses, your shortcomings, are then anthropomorphized out there. And you do not have to be a semi-illiterate, dumb, fundamental Christian in the South of the United States somewhere to say, well, how foolish that people are actually going to send money into a TV evangelist and believe that they're going to pray that God in some way is going to look down and say, you've been a good boy, and I've had enough of those damn master charges just jumping all over you. Notwithstanding the fact that you went out and did it. It's just then beyond the pale of the mind to have to deal with it in that way. Now, they interpret it other ways, but that is what it is. It now comes out, and you do not have to be religious, of course. Some of you should already jump there to know nowadays. Still, you can either consider this contemporaneous or 4,000 years ago, but now it's out about addictive personalities. That, yes, I'm a drunk. I'm an alcoholic. That's the correct term, isn't it? It's not the politically correct. I'm an alcoholic. But it's no longer, it's not as people several generations ago, which that doesn't mean it's right, that thought that being a drunk, at least in certain more primitive parts of the planet, there was a character weakness, whatever the hell that was. But now it's no longer a character weakness. That is, it's not your fault. It turns out, because you have paid good money or else went to a free clinic, and they did a test on you, one of these, true and false tests of 400 questions or whatever it took to impress you, and it came out, and they took it and ran it through the computer, and it came back and it says, I started shaking my head and do it sad, but I guess nowadays they'd probably kind of smile so that you feel good and say, yeah, you are, without a doubt, you're a type A17 or something, addictive personality. That's why, and I thought I was a drunk. No, I'm not. I'm an addictive personality. Well, all of you are hip enough. You know, nowadays you can be an addictive personality if you're a female now, you can have an addictive personality to be attracted to men that beat up on you. And you can say, well, it's not my fault. I don't just pick out these trashy guys. It's something, of course, in the environmental background that makes me addictive. I just do this. I can't help it. Do you see? Now, it sounds, as it's supposed to in the city, that would sound to be more sophisticated, more urbane, more progressive than it is for a person to say, well, I'm a drunk because demons make me do it. Now, nowadays, somebody in a reasonable part of this planet, not just the United States, but any cosmopolitan area person, good breeding, decent breeding, good education, nice haircut, they're not going to believe that crap anymore. But they also do not believe that because you're a drunk, have a problem with alcohol, it does not mean that you have some inherent character flaw. Unless you're real low class and probably a bricklayer, and then they don't care anyway. But if you're part of their general milieu, and they were considering the matter, they don't believe that you have a character flaw, and they certainly don't believe that demons make you do it. You have some kind of addictive personality. It's psychological. So look what you've got. You've got a full spectrum. You've got all the way going back 4,000 or 5,000 years that ordinary history knows about. You had the Greeks, the Macedonians. You had people believing that the gods up there in Olympus, up in that talking high rise, no, they were actually up there. But isn't it funny that they showed up on Mount Olympus just about the same time, if I may be so bold as to suggest, that men began to think? It seemed, I don't know how it worked out historically. I'm just guessing. I just thought you might find it curious that these gods, from Zeus on down, considering your opinions, that they showed up there up on this mount, this high rise. They called it a mountain then, instead of a condo. They showed up at exactly the same time, according to history, that men began to think. Oh, well, I don't know. God knows what it means. So, at any rate, you've got the spectrum here. We're still talking about man's dependence upon external authority. You've got it all the way from the Greeks, for instance. You've got to speak archetypically right quick. You got all the way from the Greeks saying, well, you got these gods, and those of you that remember anything about reading a little mythology, those kind of gods back then weren't quite all that moosed up and cleaned up as, even the Old Testament. As ragtag as some of that bunch was. But these guys, Zeus and those guys would get drunk and come down and, take your woman. Push you out of the way. Or some of them come down and, take you. I don't want to think about it. At any rate, you had those kind of gods. I mean, absolutely unruly. I mean, unpredictable. And yet, so if you did something, you could say, not just, Zeus made me do it. You could say, well, Zeus was here and took me over. And they, everybody seemed to believe it. Or they would accept it. All right, so you've got all the way from that into the more civilized religions. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and all the major ones now that believe that there are good forces running the universe and bad forces. And it's according to sort of who you align yourself with, who you join up with, who you allow to have the most influence on you. So you've got that, let's say, kind of in the middle of lateral history, ordinary city history, and then more close to contemporaneous times from that kind of view, you have psychological, sociological views. That, well, I drink and I have a certain proclivity to hold up 7-Eleven stores, but it's because I grew up without a father and my mother drank and we didn't have cable. And I had to drop out of school. Well, that about covers nowadays. Somebody somewhere. A lot of people somewhere would go, oh my. But do you see it is all the same thing? And of course you do see, I'll assume, that this is not an attack on any of that. And notice it is not that they're making excuses. It's not that to say, well, people are just dumb. People are weak. No. It is all what we're talking about. It is all the dependence that the mind has. Forget character flaws and weaknesses. We're talking about this. Because it's only man that has weaknesses. Nobody else has a weakness. Nobody ever thought of about a weakness. Which is the one that I know got a little convoluted. The city even tries to be hip, or has for a long time. In the law it's known as malum per se and malum prohibitum, of things that some things are just evil in themselves. And even the law claims that it recognizes it, like murder. If we didn't have a law against it, everybody knows that murder is evil in itself. But then other things are, quote, evil simply because man decides it is. That is, it's evil to park in a no parking zone. No, literally. But it's only evil, not intrinsically. It's only evil because for our own benefit, to keep traffic flowing, etc., it's evil because we prohibit it. But Kyroots pointed out that there's a more complex view, is where the whales swallowing the sharks came in. There's another view that, again, you can take it from a kind of spectrum that it's so obvious that you cannot see it. That is, it's a whale. And let's say that you're more or less already within his jaws. And so you can't see him. It's all the way from that to, if you're ordinary, to say, I don't believe in whales, or this can't be true. That is, there is nothing evil until a man says it's evil. That may seem too obvious. And of course, if you were an ordinary person religious, you'd go, boy, what a cheap shot. Or what kind of demonic possessed person would say such a thing? But it's a fact. You don't have to be anti-religious. You've got to understand, how would anybody know that anything's evil until somebody tells you it is, right? And you can say, well, sure, now we're really getting obvious because that's part of the purpose of the church. And of course, if I was the kind of person that owned a merry-go-round, I could go, ticket please. And they'd go, what? And they'd keep looking, where's that whale? I could ride the whale here instead of a horse there. You'll never find it. There is nothing evil until you can say it is. And that's what was swallowed. It's not that, well, it's evil per se, or it's evil because we decided it is. It's evil, in quotation marks, simply because we decide it's immoral, or we've changed our standards. All of that gets eaten by one big whale. That is the talking high-rise. This, that there is nothing evil until you can say it is. Who can say that anything's evil? Not dogs, not beavers, not hippos, not sharks. Only man can say that anything is evil. It all has to do with the external authority. That you could not know what was good, if there is such a thing. And I'm not saying there's not. Or you could not know what's bad. Unless there's some external authority. An ordinary mind, since we're out of time, I was going to try to leave with it, can easily say, you can fit in yourself and say, well, hell, that's obvious as hell. No, it isn't. Because after that, that's still based upon polarized energy. Because from there, somebody would either like it or dislike it. If they said, well, yes, that's obvious, then they're either, generally, going to take some religious path after that, like, well, yes, it's obvious, that's why God sent us Holy Scriptures and prophets. Little ones who became billions, and then the billions became little infections. Ticket, please, ticket. Could I have your ticket? And if you're not religious, and you say, well, yes, that's obvious as hell, then where you're going is, well, people who are religious are nuts. That's right, nothing is evil. But there's one thing about it. Both of them are worth the same amount.